This morning I call this Bridging the Gap, Creative Adaptations for Ensemble Fundamentals. I started my career at Harrison High School in Cobb County, Georgia. I taught there for 3 years. And then after that, I moved to Texas. The Republic. Oh, another video's playing. More music. Oh, there we go. Okay. Let's see. So anyway, I moved to Texas and I taught at Clear Creek High School. And when I got there, the director had been there for about 30 years. And he rehearsed the top wind ensemble. He did the same exact warm-up every single day. The same exact warm-up. Like he would just get on the podium, turn on the metronome, and the kids would just go on robot, and then go, and then take out their piece of music, and start rehearsing. And I thought it was really interesting. We sort of kind of did the same thing at Harrison, but started to incorporate some of these adaptations to fundamentals. And what I realized by watching that process with that director is that a gap exists. And the more that I go out and watch teachers, watch band directors or orchestra directors rehearse, we all know that fundamentals are important. We all know that fundamentals are the key to developing our musicians in our ensembles. But I don't think we always make that leap for them into the repertoire. So that's what we're going to talk about today is how can we adapt how can we how can we make adaptations to our fundamentals that relate specifically to the pieces that we want to perform. So that's where I think the gap exists. There's a middle part, there's a middle component to the rehearsal process that will allow students to transfer the skills from the warm-up into the pieces that we're performing. And what I realized is as I slowly started to develop these adaptations, the pieces that I could get my students to perform came together so much quicker. David Vanderwalker used to say, we want students to master something at the most basic level. That's the purpose of the fundamentals. We want them to master those fundamentals at the most basic level, and we want to take those skills, the tone, quality, the intonation, technique, and we want to apply them to the pieces that we're performing. It's fundamentals. We know that they're important. Donald Sinta, who's the retired professor of saxophone at the University of Michigan, legendary saxophone professor, every single morning at 7 a.m., he practices in the bathroom of Ravelli Hall at the University of Michigan. Still, he is 83 years old. And you will find, if you go to Ravelli Hall at 7 a.m., you will hear a metronome, and you will hear a drone, and you will hear a saxophone player coming from the men's bathroom. And it's Donald Sinta. He still does it every single day. He still does his long tones. He still plays his scales. We know that these fundamentals are important. So let's start there. Let's start talking about exactly what fundamentals we are doing. Someone asked me yesterday what method book I use. I never used a method book. And the more that I talk to more directors, I only used a method book for sight reading. That's when we would pass it out and we would just kind of read a page or something at the beginning of the year, depending on the group. But the fundamentals that I wrote out 15 different exercises. I tried to elicit information from professional musicians, friends that I had from college, experts on their instrument, and I said, hey, what do you do as a warm-up? So Michael Martin and I are really great friends from Atlanta, and I said, hey, Mike, what do you do for a warm-up? What did you learn? Asking different people and coming up with this more professional way of warming up that we can then translate into a full ensemble setting. So what I did is we compiled a packet of about 15 different exercises, and we worked through those exercises and then were able to adapt those exercises. So what exactly they were? We all know process is important. We all know that we need to have a process from the time the students come in. And if we establish that from the moment they start band, then we're going to be much more successful. And if we continue that process through their senior year, they don't know anything different. They don't know that other people down the street do it differently. So if we establish that process of you come in the room, you get your instrument, you have a minute. I used to put a timer up. I don't know if you guys do that. You put an egg timer, and it just beeps, and then, So kind of a fun way to make sure that they get in their seat and they're ready to go, or they're warming up on their own if you trust them enough to do that, or they are old enough. And then we always started with breathing exercises. I hope, Gino was talking about that yesterday, doing that. How many of you have used balloons before? I kind of asked before. Okay, if you haven't used balloons, I actually have some, but we might do it later. If you don't use balloons, I highly recommend it. For younger students especially, because it is a visual aid for them to see actually if air is moving or not. And it's fun. Everyone loves to blow up a balloon. So think about how maybe you can incorporate the breathing exercises. We would do those every day, 16 counts, 12 counts, 8 counts, very much different breathing gym exercises. Every day is something different. However, it falls under the umbrella of breathing exercises. I did this yesterday in the rehearsing the band clinic, but the humming, singing, and buzzing, how many of you sing with your ensembles? Great. If you haven't, if you don't sing with your ensembles, you can trick them into singing. Just really quickly, everyone hum a pitch. Go. Good. Put your hand on your chest. Good. So that's how I would do it. I would say, raise your hand if you feel your hand vibrating. Or raise your hand if you feel your chest vibrating. Good. Then everyone put your hand, try and find your last rib right here. Put your hands right there. Hum the same pitch. Ready, go. If you don't feel that resonating or vibrating, try and open up your throat and think deeper and darker. All right, try one more time. Ready, go. Anyone feel it vibrating? Yeah, you should feel it kind of opening up, and if you kind of have to push on your rib a little bit to feel that. Then the last one is, this is a Freddie Martin thing. He would say, it should tickle your eyebrows, and that's how he would say it to the kids, and they would all giggle. But kind of put your head like right on your nasal area, right where your sinuses are, that mine are very pressurized today. And ready, hum. Think more taller and open. Does anyone feel it vibrating and resonating? That's kind of, if you can really feel it in your nose, that's when singers know that they're finding the resonance. Okay, do it one more time. So then look, you have like all of the kids like holding their nose, and then you've tricked them. Okay, here we go, ready? And go. Now drop your jaw and say, oh, oh. Yeah, so all of a sudden you've tricked them into singing. So we would start with that process. We would do just a little bit every day. And again, add on to it depending on the ensemble. They were singing concert F, we would sing concert B flat, and then we would just morph that depending on the advanced of the group, and everything just slowly shifts into this other direction. So breathing, humming, singing, did lots of buzzing, so the brass would buzz, the woodwinds would play. Again, nothing crazy inventive. We're not reinventing the wheel here. The third exercise was always a concert F, then they would move into this sequential fashion of then playing the concert F, matching the sound. Again, I did this yesterday, so I apologize if this is repetition, but sometimes when we sang on different vowels. So this side would sing on O, this sing on A, E, and Ready, everyone hum first, go. Now sing on the same vowel. Sing on O. And all of a sudden, the kids can hear the difference of that. Now play the concert F. Okay, clarinets, you're playing more of an A. Trumpets, you're playing more of an E. Try and think more O. Try and think more relaxed and open. And match to what you have in your ear of singing. So again, we're moving in a very sequential way. Then we start doing the Remington exercises. We do Remington descending. I have learned that many people don't do Remington ascending. Many people just go ba da 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 da. Why don't we go up? And then we talk about our flute players, our clarinet players. Why can't they play high notes? Why can't they play higher notes? Because we never go up on Remington. So think about that. If that is a pattern that we have fallen into of, we just do this exercise each day. Starting Remington, starting on other notes. Have you started Remington on C sharp and done a Remington down and up? That's what we're going to talk about, is how can we adapt this very specifically to the piece that we're going to perform. And then doing Remington in intervals. Once they've really established and mastered F Remington down and up, doing it B flat and F together, doing chords on Remington, doing something like that. So again, it's falling under this umbrella of long tones and consistent, during that time. Cindy Lansford in Texas always said, teach like your hair is on fire. And I've always remembered that. Teach like your hair is on fire. And so, while you're doing this, you're going around the room and you're fixing posture and you're fixing embouchures and doing all the things that we know how to do. Passing fours. Does anyone do passing fours? It's all. It used to be called F around the room, but then people realized what they were saying. They're saying F around the room, and people, yeah. So passing fours. This is the the best, most accountable exercise that you can do for your ensemble. So passing 4 is F around the room, everyone plays concert F, and then you go from the bottom of the score to the top around the room. So there are so many adaptations and so many ways that you can hear. What are some of the advantages of doing that exercise for people that do it? Raise your hand if you do. Yeah.
Accountability.
Yeah. Yeah. What else? What else are you able to hear? What's it?
Tuning.
Yeah, the matching between sections. So if the tubas start bo and then the euphoniums go ah, did that sound the same? No. Try it again. And you're just asking questions. What else? Yeah, the starts, the seamless transition. Is it kada or how they're releasing into the next sound? What else?
Individual tone quality.
Yeah, good. Because you don't have to do sections. You can just do people. And so people, what I learned watching Tom Bennett and Eddie Green rehearse is they would just do like every single person around the room. That is a very quick way to see the individual accountability of each person and to see, Brandon is not doing well or he's doing great or Brandon. So we want to, it's an easy way for us, maybe if we don't have the time to do individual pass-offs or individual listenings. Does it have to be on concert F? No. Play the first 5 notes of the scale around the room, or passing 4s, whatever, however you want to do that exercise. Anyone else have any advantages they've seen through that exercise?
Matching and intonation.
Yeah, matching, intonation, all of that stuff. Making sure it's a great exercise for teaching students how to listen for beats, between 2 individual students or even between 2 individual sections, talking about the difference between vowels. Oh, did you hear that the clarinets played a E sound and the trumpets played more of an O? Which one do we want? Oh, let's all try and match the trumpets. Do it again. And so it's a great way to begin those discussions about all these various elements. Yeah.
I've done it in the variation where they have trios, and this person will drop out, and this person will add in, this person will drop out, and you keep adding in, so they kind of have to listen to their.
Oh yeah, that's cool. Yeah, they have to keep listening to the around them.
Count phrase, and so they hold it for 12, and then when they get,
Yeah.
every 4 counts you drop and add somebody in.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a really cool exercise. So we would move, so we've done, if you think about how maybe a professional musician warms up, they do lots of different long tones, getting their body ready, and then start working into the technique. And this is just obvious, doing scales, but how often in music do you hear ba 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 ba? What piece actually does that? And that's something you have to think about. It's like, oh, let's play our scales, right? Deek, 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 ba ba ba. So we have to keep thinking about what is the most applicable way. In music, how are scale passages usually written? Does it always start on the root? No. Does it always start in one scale? No, there's usually different modes or anything. So yes, the all-state requirements that is important. However, that's a byproduct. That can't be the only way that we teach something. That can be the only way that we learn how to do scales. So that's why I do a lot of Clark studies. We have the Clark studies in every key, ba da ba ba beat up ba ba beat up ba, because that passage and that finger combination is a little more applicable to what we actually see in music. And then what we would do, different variations on that are the articulations: slur 2, tongue 2, slur 2, slur 3, tongue 1, slur 3, double tonguing. We would do them in all the different variations around the room, and just we used to have competitions like, Fridays, we just keep clicking the metronome up and keep clicking the metronome up. Nothing new there, but then I remember one girl, Jenny, she was like, Mr. Meyer, 184. Like, oh, all right. And she just laid it down for everyone. Like, oh, all right, game over right then. So you kind of make it fun. And like I said, I love doing technique. I love working with that because you can just rapid fire on all of it. But it sets the groundwork for then how you approach teaching technique in sectionals. Doing it slow so everyone can match, and doing short, long, short, all these different variations and combinations. Some of the other things that we do are flow studies. Anyone do the Chickowitz flow studies? Be da dee da 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 dee da da da. Yeah, if you're a trumpet player, you know these very, very well. These are really great for finding the evenness of tone. And when we talk about vowels, if you do the Chickowitz flow studies, and if you don't have these, please just email me and I will just send you all 15 exercises and you can pick and choose. I have them all in a PDF form or Finale. So what it does, it just starts on, concert F, ba da 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 dee da 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 dee da. And what that works on is the evenness of sound in there, because most likely a student is going to play ba-da-da-da-da-da, and they get really bright in the higher register and very uneven and airy in the lower register. So it keeps that idea of pressure, kind of like a bagpipe player, just pushing the air and pushing the sound, having this continuous stream of air while the fingers are moving and relaxed underneath it. So we would do that in all the various different keys, all the various different iterations of it. And then we would do harmony chords. Anyone do harmony chords? This is something that we stole from the Japanese DVDs. So it's I never did Bach chorales. I will honestly admit I never did a Bach chorale. And the reason I didn't is because the harmonic language of that was a little too difficult for my kids to really grasp and master. So at the beginning of the year with all 3 ensembles, we always did harmony chords, and it's a sequence of 1, 4, 5, 1. That's it. And in the key of in B flat, we did it, and all it was is just a series of chords. But then we would break it up into different groups. So then we would have, we had 4 different groups: the lows, the middle highs, and the highs. And we had different groups that would tier on top of one another. And my always analogy was that it was like a wedding cake or a birthday cake, a tiered cake. And that the highs should just float right on top. They should be the bride and groom on the top. They shouldn't be a cement brick that crushes the rest of the cake. And so everyone tries to match the low voices, and that's how you can work on balance, you can work on sound. But what that does is it allows the students to master the sound of what an in-tune chord looks like. How many of you use a harmony director? That is the best investment you can ever make in your teaching career, I promise you. It is like I had to teach 1 year without it. It was like, I don't know what to do. If you don't know what a harmony director is, everyone know what a harmony director is? Kind of, they've seen it. It is amazing. It's a little keyboard that Yamaha makes, but what is different about that keyboard is kind of an all-in-one. And I think with technology, the harmony director might be going out the window. It might not be needed. You can do a lot of it on the iPad now. But it has a keyboard on it. It also has transposition buttons, so it has a C, F, B flat, and E flat button. And you just hit the F button. If you're like doing a horn sectional, you just hit the F button and play it on the piano. So it automatically transposes it for you. It also has tuning. It's a great way of teaching in-tune chords because you can slightly bend the pitch for it, and you can hear the beats on the third of the chord, and then you can raise it. So it gives the students an idea of what in-tune chords sound like at the most basic level. So the students understand what an ensemble balanced chord sounds like. And we mastered that at the beginning of the year. That way, when we get to our music, it's fascinating. You get to a chord, like I'll play it later. You get to a chord, and then it sounds out of tune, and you play, okay, everyone play your harmony chord. Ba-da-da. And then, okay, match that chord. Play the chord again and try and match the same balance. And the students already have the aural awareness to balance that chord. So that's kind of what we did. We did read, we did Bach chorales in the sense of getting line and shape and phrase, but it wasn't as, okay, we play this Bach chorale, and that's all that we play. But we would do different variations then on the harmony chords to make sure that we're balancing, add articulation, add dynamics, etc., while maintaining this idea of the balanced sound. So those by the time that we got through all of that, that's pretty much what we did. And then anything extra was introduced in sectionals or introduced in other parts. I wanted to make sure as a director that the ensemble fundamental time was about the development of the students, as much about the individual musician as I could, but also more about the ensemble awareness, the ensemble making sure that they understood how to perform in an ensemble. And then the more individual components we did in after-school sectionals, which with each of the bands. So trying to divide those responsibilities and not trying to teach that all the time. So timeline. David McGrath kind of put this into my ear early on. When I was teaching in Cobb County and he was down the street. But this is about his timeline of how much he spends on fundamentals. And I have sort of lived to this, is that during band camp, you spend 80% of the time on fundamentals. Now, like, oh my God, how many times can you do the Remington? Well, if you creatively adapt it, kids will do anything for an amount of time. As long as you're excited about it, they will do anything that you want. So I've spent like an hour and a half doing fundamentals. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh crap, we actually have to get to the music. Because I love doing it, because you can see the mastery, you can see them getting better before your eyes. And it's so exciting to see that. So what you can notice about that, the first quarter, 70-30, November, December, January, all of a sudden the tide starts switching. Like as we get closer to these major performances in the springtime, and they start mastering those exercises, less time has to be spent on them. And on the right side of the column, the time spent on the actual pieces of music does include some of these adaptations that apply directly to them. So at the beginning of the year, no matter their age, no matter how long they've been in the program or whatever, they are focusing and we are mastering F. Remington again. Because, again, like the Donald Cinta, if you're 83, you can still play Concert F and you can still master and sound incredible on Concert F. We all can work on that in various ways. But by the time like March comes around, we got work to do. We got to work on our music. So we don't necessarily do F. Remington, but we do some sort of adaptation to that. And then in May, it kind of starts reversing itself again. After, we had, major festivals, contests, whatever. After that, that's when I started to incorporate some of these advanced techniques. That's when we started to do modes. That's when we did minor scales. That's when we did all these different advanced techniques to keep challenging the student at the end of the year. So sometimes we wouldn't do scales, like around January, February, March, we weren't doing scales because they got a lot of that at the beginning of the year. I had other priorities to get to in my 52 minutes that I had with my ensemble. And then at the end of the year, that's when we would start challenging them to get to the next level. Does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
How many concerts do you have in a typical year when you were doing?
We had 5. So we had a fall concert. That's a great question. So because of this timeline, the music that I picked was always about 3 grades lower than 2 or 3 grades lower than what I would actually perform in the springtime. So we're going to get to that in just a second. So we had the fall concert, winter concert. Sometimes we did a February chamber concert. We call it Chilean chamber music. So in January when they came back, they were working in their various chamber groups. And the way that we performed it was we had a chili cook-off or a barbecue cook-off, which in Texas was like, everyone wanted to flex their muscles a little bit of how good their barbecue was. And then we would all the various chamber groups would come and perform. And so that helped set up what we actually did for contest, and then we would have a spring concert. And that's kind of how we structured it. Yeah?
During those warm-ups, do you just have percussion on keyboards?
Yeah.
Everything?
Yeah, we made sure that the percussion were on keyboards or snare drum technique or something, that's a great question because we would make sure that they were included somehow. I always had incredible leadership. I tried to foster that too. So the percussion section leader sometimes would take that. If I knew I had something to do, I would ask Jordan, Jordan, can you take them into the, out here, and why don't you work on this with some of these students and kind of lead this? And try and put that impetus on them and then follow up and see how it went, run in and check on them, whatever. If I needed to focus something that didn't include the percussion. But that's a great question. So it's a rough timeline, but I think it's something important to keep in the back of your head because we know that these fundamentals are so important and it's how we develop the repertoire that we're going to perform. So creative accountability. So people are like, how can you spend that long on warm-ups? The accountability and the groupings is really what makes that. We talked about doing the passing fours and the amount of times. If you ask questions and you engage their brain about what they're doing, it makes it go by faster. So we would do a ton of different groupings. These are very easy, but the creativity comes in making sure that they're different every single day. So if you're doing F. Remington, we would have the woodwinds play, then we'd have the brass buzz. And then, you fix it, then you switch. And you switch in the sense that the woodwinds will take it up an octave. And that's something I didn't learn until my 6th year of teaching and going, oh yeah, the woodwinds need to play up there. They need to do that much, 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 much more than they think. They need to hear the lower octave and they need to flip it up and work on playing F above the staff. And so the brass would actually play the lower octave and then we would repeat. So the brass would play at the lower octave, the woodwinds would play it in the upper octave. We'd all squeal and go like this. They give another time to do it. Because they need those opportunities to figure out how to do it. Okay, woodwinds play the lower octave, sing it, play the upper octave, and then you're giving them information so they feel really comfortable in all of those various ranges. And again, I think that's something that gets overlooked all the time. And then we wonder why we can't play all the high notes and the high notes don't come out in the music that we want to perform. So we have different models, not like supermodels, but this is another great way of accountability if you don't already do that. So maybe at the beginning of the year, I would always have the first chair players or the stronger players be the models. So we would have one from each section, or maybe just brass or woodwinds. You guys play first. Ba-da-da. Everyone repeat. Okay, what's the difference between those two? What do you hear is the difference? Lots of questioning. Then throughout the year, then you start picking different people who are models. People that are down the section a little bit more. Why? Because as soon as you call on them, they go, because as Dr. Tim said, they don't want to be embarrassed in front of their peers. And you create that safe environment where they don't want to disappoint their peers. However, they don't want to disappoint their peers, but they also need the information. So that's just another way of, again, finding this accountability, hearing students individually, and making sure that they're on the same page. Because if we just keep with the principal players, those students hide. And those students kind of go by the wayside, and then we wonder why in the ensemble context, it's not as clean or it's not as balanced and matched as what we want. The range, so obviously we talked about the 4 different groups. You can have, one of the best things that I ever did is have different chamber groups perform. So what I did one time, this was when we were doing George Washington Bicentennial March, and we started doing that. I experimented with the wind ensemble. Do you need some? Hey, okay. We were doing George Washington, and I just experimented. We kind of got into this polishing process. We knew the rhythms, I was teaching it, and I was trying to figure out, okay, what is the next level? So what we did in that is I created 4 different chamber groups. And so I split the ensemble up basically into 4 different groups comprising of a whole bunch of different instruments. I tried to get, soprano, alto, tenor, bass into the mix, and I split them off into 4 different classrooms, and I gave them a task. And I said, I picked a leader of the group, and I said, here's what you're going to do. I want you to rehearse just the opening strain of George Washington Bicentennial, and I want you to, and it's facilitating this chamber music atmosphere. I want people to give input. I want to, and have a person that's leading all of that. And I just sent them off going, oh dear God, what did I just do? And it was incredible, actually, what happened. I started moseying around and peeking in, and these students just took ownership. I picked the right ones, like the good leaders that I knew would not, that would, do a really great job. And they started doing that. And then they came back into rehearsal, and they played it for each other. They stood up in front of the group, and they each played the opening strain. That is accountability, because you can hear everybody. And so the first time, they kind of didn't take it seriously, and then they performed in front of their peers. I didn't have to say anything. And they just performed, and you could see kind of like the ones that were shy, and they were unprepared. The second time I did it, it was completely different. They all of a sudden knew that chamber day was coming, and they practiced, and because they didn't want to be embarrassed in front of their peers. And we didn't promote that embarrassment, but it's just that general feeling. And then another variation of what we did on that is that I started to choose kids that I never, like kind of the ones further down the section. And it was so amazing to see what they could do when they were given the opportunity. They were younger students. I had a girl who had Asperger's syndrome, and she was incredible. She was a great flute player, but she never talked. And she came up to me and goes, Mr. Meyer, I'd like to lead the chamber group today. I was like, okay. And I will never forget watching her. She was like just on those kids. You're doing this, you're doing this, you're doing this. What do we need to do? It was incredible once she was given the opportunity to do that. And the performance level just rose because of that. So that's another idea of how we can break this up into accountability. Different unique combinations, that kind of goes along with it. And we all know grade, age, rows, clothes, whatever. People who are playing jeans play, ready, go. People who are wearing khaki shorts, people who when I was in Texas, people who are University of Houston Cougars fans, boo, people like Baylor, whatever. You're trying to find different ways each and every day to find who is doing what in your ensemble. And those are the creative ways that we can hold students more accountable. So the creative adaptations, we kind of talked about most of these. Here are the different ways that we can adapt any of these fundamentals. The articulation, the dynamics, balance and blend. Teaching balance and blend, obviously we know, but I don't think sometimes we do it as much as we can. We're trying to teach students what the actual sound of the group from their chair is. When was the last time that all of you actually sat in the ensemble while another teacher taught? I think the director's concert band is a great opportunity for that. I know, especially doing this whole conducting degree, once I sat down again and played my French horn for a conductor, I was like, oh, that's what I need as a player. Or sit in different parts of the ensemble. I'm so used to I'm a French horn player, and so I'm so used to sitting on the right side of the conductor. But what does a trumpet player sound like? What does it sound like from that point in the room? What does it sound like a clarinet player? And all of a sudden, I'm hearing things that I never heard before. And it's different than moving around the room. It's actually like kind of being there. So what I would do is have my drum major kind of go through some of the warm-ups, and I would sit in a different section. And making sure that I knew, because sometimes you tell everyone to listen for the tubas, but sometimes you really can't hear the tubas depending on where you are in the room. So it caters our feedback. Some of the things that we are just told to say, is that the actual reality of the student? So I think just kind of keep questioning some of these things that are passed down to us and wondering what the child is actually experiencing in that moment. Okay, I touched on this yesterday, score study. Ever since I had to start teaching conducting classes to undergrad students, I have really tried to rethink the idea of score study. I think there are two components. There is the what. Michael Haithcock calls it the navigational. So we know from the Frank Battisti book or whatever you use to learn score study that any piece that you pick up, you have to do a complete historical, thematic, harmonic, rhythmic, and stylistic analysis. You have to understand the piece. You have to internalize the piece. You have to love the piece. And everything about you has to resonate about this piece, or else it will not come across. Because these students do not know, they don't know Holst. They don't know, it's not what they listen to. It's not what they're eager to go, oh my God, I can't wait to play this piece. You have one or two of those students, but they'd rather play Beyonce or they'd rather play Hey Baby or whatever. So everything about you has to be invested in this piece, and we have to know it, exactly what is going on. And our desire, the what, is our desire to create the clearest aural image of the final product. How many of you have heard the term aural image? That's something, our aural image of the piece. So if you think about the Holst first suite, how you can hear the first line you can hear a tuba playing that first line. You can hear maybe the next variation. Can you hear the full harmony in your mind, in your inner ear right now? Can you hear the fourth variation of that? Can you hear the brilliance of the last chord? That's the aural image of what we need to create. Some people have asked me, a lot of students, like, how did you do your score study? I really did it at the gym. I was that person that would sit on an elliptical and look at my score at the gym. I was killing two birds with one stone at that point. It was my stress relief. And so I made sure, I'd be just having the score. Sometimes I would have a recording. If you do score study, be careful about the recordings. I listened to recordings at the very beginning of the process, and one of the very best things that I ever did I did as an undergrad was my professor made me find every single recording of the Holst E-flat suite, every one. There's like 22, and I had to listen to every one and write out what I liked and I didn't like about each of those recordings. And I had to scrutinize Bob Reynolds' recording. I had to scrutinize Corporon, and just in the comfort. But that taught me interpretation. That taught me what my personal ear loves. I love the sound of the Michigan Symphony Band. I love this interpretation. I love how Bob Reynolds slows down in the first variation. Ba-da-da-dee-da-da-bee-da-blah. It's beautiful. So it taught me how to do things. So every piece that I perform, I try and find every single recording I can. I also go on YouTube and find the other recordings, and because that teaches my ear of going, that's hard. We have all of these professional recordings, but real live true time recording, of bands that put their recording on YouTube. That is a great way of understanding the challenges if you've never done a piece before. So again, just thinking about this idea of score study and creating this aural image of what we need to do by listening to recordings, and then listening to recordings and then looking at the score separately. So not doing the worst thing that you can do is sit at a score and go like this. Because what do you do when you get on the podium? Why aren't you watching me? Our habits translate. So how I do this is I look at the score separate, I study it at my kitchen table, and then I get up and I sing and I move and I think about how I want to do this. And I try to internalize it in my body. So that way I'm open and I'm available rather than sitting there trying just to honker through the meter. So think about how those different ways that you can maybe elevate your idea of score study. And I really would do it at the gym. I would bring the score and I would just sit there and I would be on the bike and I would look at it. I put on the tonal energy of pitch in my ear and I would kind of sing through. And I was that weird guy at the gym, you know, the looks that I've gotten over the years. However, one, the blood is flowing, the creativity and endorphins are going. So the idea of what, and then I would think about how I'm going to teach this. That's the second part that I think is left out of many conducting texts, or maybe music ed curriculum classes that I've sort of seen over the years, is that we take a piece and we study it, but the next step you have to think about is how am I going to teach this in an effective, efficient, and sequential manner? I have to be able to look at American River songs and go, oh God, my kids don't know 6/8. Okay, how am I going to teach? I know the rhythm is ba-dum, ba-dum, bum, ba-dum, ba-dum, bum, ba-dum, ba-dum, or the 2/4 part. But how am I actually going to teach this? And that process is another layer that we have to think about in order to create efficient performances. What do my students already know? That's a question we have to ask. What do they already know and what will be the most challenging? And I ask that for every piece. Even with the Michigan Symphony Band, if I'm doing a piece with them, what do they already know and what is going to be challenging even for that level of player? And then try and anticipate those and figure out how I'm going to make that process happen. Okay, so I'm going to use the example of Hammersmith. We did that in 2013, and if you were there yesterday, Gary Markham told me a long time ago, he goes, never tell them it's hard. Don't tell them it's hard. And I did that while I was at Harrison. I had the second band at Harrison, and one year we did Apollo Unleashed, the third movement of the Tickle Symphony, and the Maslenka Short Symphony. Those students had no idea how hard it was, but they were great pieces that they loved, and we just taught them in a very sequential way, and they had an incredible performance of those pieces. The second band did those pieces. You know, a lot of this process led up to that point. When we talk about repertoire selection, if I know that I'm going to do Hammersmith, if I've decided that as one of my 3 pieces that I think might work as a big piece for that year, I'm going to program 2 or 3 grades lower for the fall concert that still has some of these pedagogical considerations in them. So what pieces can I perform in October that's going to help translate? What pieces can they master in October that will help translate to a piece like Hammersmith in 2/4, in 6/8, F minor keys, major keys, all these different things. And then I think about another level for the winter concert. And then by the, like other chamber pieces that we might do in February. And then also, so when they get Hammersmith, there's not these foreign concepts to them. So that's something to think about with how you program throughout the school year in a very specific way that scaffolds them to what we ultimately want them to learn. But anyway, so I just decided, I love Hammersmith. I think it's the most, oh, sorry. I'm sorry, it's a habit. I didn't forget it's here. Kind of lost my train of thought. So I've loved the piece. I sort of thought that I could do it. And so I passed it out to the students in January. And yeah, we kind of read through it, and we didn't read through it actually at all. But I kind of started with the really loud, fast section and got them hooked. I didn't start with the part at the beginning that's horribly hard in F minor and E major. I didn't show them that part. We kind of just listened to it, and they were like, oh, that's kind of cool. We never told them how hard it was, but we started with the dance that's in the middle of it that gets loud and raucous in the middle. And I had them hooked on it. So the way that I taught this piece, we started it in January, and we recorded it for Midwest at the end of February. So in 2 months, these students put it together. So previously, I had programmed, one of the whole suites. I had programmed something that was in 6/8. We worked on E major a lot in different parts. And so all these pedagogical considerations that I did, that I made as I was studying the score. That's one thing that what do my students already know, and what are going to be the challenges of this? Understanding the imagery, the mental endurance, the technical challenges, 2/4. So I have that list. Now, the next thing that I did was isolate different parts of the piece. So this opening ostinato that happens, I wrote that out for everyone in finale. It took me 5 minutes to do, because just copy, paste, change the octaves. So I wrote this out, and if you really analyze the opening of Hammersmith, it's just F minor that starts on G and goes all the way up to D, the 6th. So it goes from the 7th to the 6th. Well, the 2nd to the 6th. That's all it is. It's an F minor scale. So what I did was I did an F ascending as a warm-up with alteration. So we would start F ascending each day. We did F descending all the way down to G. Okay, so we have the range covered, but they're also thinking applying it to something that they've already mastered in the first semester. Then we would sing through all of this on an O. We've established the singing with the top group, and I would play and have on the harmony director, I would have a student play, and everyone would mimic it on O. The brass would buzz through to find the center of the pitches. We'd play it in a round across the ensemble, and then we would add various dynamics and articulations to it. Okay, so play it now mezzo forte, make it comfortable. All right, now let's try it next day, mezzo piano. Next day, piano. Nope, that's not right. Go back to mezzo forte. You have a great sound in mezzo forte. Go back to piano. So we're constantly adjusting it, constantly going back to what they know, and then moving back to what actually is going to apply for the music. We did the same thing. I called it the Thames River motive. This is the opening motive for the horns. This is the one that's in E major. So, B major. Wait, it's F minor and B major? Sorry, yeah, B major. I guess that is. But that's the horn part. That's right, it's E major. Okay, sorry, it's early. It's in E major, but this is the actual horn part in B major. So I wrote that out, again, for everyone. And if you really analyze it, a lot of it is just a lyrical line. There's some things, some scalar passages in there, but it's like a long tone exercise. That's all it is. So we would write that out for everyone, and everyone would play it. We do the same process. Everyone would sing it. We would do F descending, F ascending on Remington, etc., to kind of set up this theme. Yeah?
That's also a really good thing. I do that kind of thing, write a part out for everybody to learn as an exercise. It's also good for accountability, too.
Yeah.
Making the tuba player play something that...
Exactly. Exactly. That's a great point. So, but the other thing, too, is everyone knows that motive, too. So when you actually get to the performance of the piece and the horns crack a note, the flute player knows exactly what they should be doing. And they go, ooh. and that's when I know I don't have to say anything. Like, that was great. Like, I don't have to stop because their peer told them, dude, you really sucked at that today. And they're honest with each other. I was like, yes, let's go. Because they're more brutally honest than I could be with them. But it's that, it's healthy. And that's the part of it, is you have to constantly make sure that they're not, degrading each other or calling each other out. But so I would write that out for everyone, and we would do a constant variation. So when I talk about, we would only spend 30, 70, that part of the, working on the music, 70 was doing stuff like this. It's directly applicable to music while still developing their skills. So yeah, we would sing through O, the brass would buzz, while the woodwinds played the melody as a pitch reference. The principals would play, others would just use air. They would play certain portions as a long tone or a whole note warm-up. Maybe we wouldn't do the entire thing, maybe we would just do part of it and really try and isolate, focus, work on the phrasing of it, dynamics, the line of it. And we would play in various combinations with the opening ostinato. So then, that's when we go back to the different combinations, okay? So freshmen and sophomores in the room play the opening ostinato, juniors and seniors play the Thames River motive. Okay, ready? Here we go. Great. I actually can need more balance. You start working on your balance. Then you switch it. Maybe people, whatever combinations that you want, woodwinds and brass, high, lows, are playing these motives on top of one another, and the students are getting that into their ears of how we can do this, of how this is actually supposed to sound. And then students choose various dynamics and phrasing. All right, Steve, what do you want to play today? Let's play it forte and let's have, articulate it all. Great. Have them come up with their own creative combinations. So they're investing in this process. How does that sound to you? Then you can get into the discussion of, why do you think Holst, does it make sense now why Holst slurred it? Why didn't he have that all articulated? And you can start to bring in these types of discussions into your rehearsal that kind of illuminate or spark their imagination. So when all that is said and done, how many times they have played it, maybe it's the first week or the 2 weeks, or we kind of do that all throughout this process. By the time you actually go back to the beginning and have the tubas and euphoniums play and the horns, there's very little rehearsing that you have to do. So this is, I'll just play, this is there, if I can find my mouse. There we go. This is the actual recording that we made. This is at the end of February. There's 6 horns. Only about 30% of my kids took private lessons in this group. And we can kind of so that's the idea behind that. And again, yes, it took a little bit of tweaking, but at the end of the day, everyone in the ensemble knew how this opening passage should sound. So we did the same thing with, I called it a dysfunctional dance. So this was a bum 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 bum. And if you really analyze that, if you kind of take out all of the leaps, it's very condensed. You know, the hardest part of that is the leaps. The hardest part of that is it's not so much the finger combinations, but it's the evenness. So it doesn't sound like a donkey of, you know, you hear all those various things as you start rehearsing it. So with some of the thing, again, write this out for everyone. Make sure that, you know, you can flip octaves so it's accessible for the tubas and the low reeds, the saxophones, whatever. And they would count and clap on a specific system while they were positioning. So everyone at the beginning of the day, and to N, and to N, and to N, and so count and finger along. And then I would always ask, how many of you 100% did it correct? Nope, do it again. And as soon as, that is one thing that I learned going to Texas, is the idea of making sure that they can finger a position along and say it before they actually play it. It's a great way to rehearse that doesn't wear them out, but it's also a mental reinforcement. And I think some people do it, but they don't do it to 100% of the level. We kind of just go to about 60 and that's okay. But making sure that every single student is doing it and you're just watching their fingers as they go. So we would be able to count and clap through the entire march, or count and position along through the entire march. And then they would play it. So by the end of the year, or that was my goal, is when we did Easter Monday, 1, a 2, yendo, 1, yendo, 2, yendo, 1, yendo, 2, yendo, 1, 2. Okay, how many did it? You know, and do it again. You know, get your fingers moving, do it slow. But that's another great rehearsal technique that will help reinforce the technical. So play the rhythm only on a concert F. Why would we do that? What does playing it only on a concert F do? Yeah, isolates the skill. And you can fix the articulation, you can fix the tone quality. So again, when you're doing a march or you're doing a technical passage, play the entire thing on concert F. So they would go, nope, play it on one note, ba 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 ba, and I could mold and I could craft the exact style of note that I wanted. I want it light and lifted. We use percentages, so we would play it on 100% notes, ba 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 ba. The space, there's no space in between the notes. Then we would play it on 50%, ba 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 ba. I want right in the middle, 75, ba 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 ba. So it has this light lifted quality. Anything that you can do that is objective in the student's brain will get you there faster. It's not artistic. Like, I can't stand in front of the University of Michigan Symphony Band and say, oh, play that 4%, play that bill 5%. Those musicians are way past that. But with a developing student, the more that you can put it in their brain of the specificity, the easier, the better it's going to be. So we would do it, play rhythm only, play slowly as long tones, so that way they're feeling the leaps and the bounds, and pass it around the room in the order of the piece. So if you look at the piece, it starts with the flutes, then it goes to the clarinet, then it goes to the saxophones, and we would do that in rehearsal. That was part of our warm-up process after doing some of these. So then, okay, let's look at this measure in the piece. Oh my God, it's exactly how we just played it. Do it the same way. And all of a sudden they have now the piece, and the piece is not as hard. We do the same thing with the Irish jig motive, because it's just like the opening where the two compound on top of one another. Count and clap, play the rhythm only, sing and play along with the dysfunctional dance. Again, finding these combinations. So this is what this ended up looking like, or sounding like. And what we consider hard is no longer hard. Was there? All those cluster chords underneath the Irish jig motive, all I really had to do was tell them how to play a harmony chord, and they instantly fixed it. They fixed the balance because it was kind of scored exactly like a harmony chord. I never really had to isolate it as much of like, oh, you have the ninth, oh, you have the seventh, you know, this is a cluster, bring it out. All I really had to say was, okay, play it like the balance of a harmony chord and then just tweak the levels of it. And instantly it came together. Because it's just half notes. It's just, you know, I think we think some things are harder than they actually really can be or are. Same with that chord. So this incredibly difficult woodwind passage, I've already established how I want eighth notes to sound, dot, 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 dot. We've worked on that on concert F. So all we had to do was take that knowledge and apply it to the technique and do the technique slow in a sectional. And so we've established through all of this the main bigger picture of the piece. Yes, when you listen to that, there are things that are not on these various motives. However, they all apply to different principles that we've established. Does that make sense? How that kind of works. So yes, there are things that we worked on in sectionals, different passages and all of that, but at the end of the day, the students understood how the articulation, the balance, what the piece and the concept were. Okay, so I fully understand that you will go, Steve, my band will never play Hammersmith. Okay, that's great. So we can apply this. We did this with every single band. We did this when we did American River songs. I did that when we taught 8th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade, beginning band. That is how I approach the teaching of all of these pieces. So if you look at American River songs, you know, what are the things that we need to consider? Rhythm, balance, articulation, dynamics. Yeah. So what would we do? You know, we all know the rhythm sheets. We've hopefully done rhythm sheets, but I would write down each of the rhythms like this, and especially for the younger bands, they would have a rhythm sheet. What would we do? We would count, clap, we would write the rhythms. I learned very early on that I was doing a lot of assumptions about how they wrote. If you ever go around and have something write them in and then actually look at what they're writing, it could be very revealing to you about what there actually is going in their part. So we need to make sure that they're understanding it fully, that you're not always giving them the answer. I talk really fast, which I'm sure you all understand by now. And so my go, and I really have to take a step back to really understand and make sure that my students are comprehending what I'm asking them to. So they can count, they can clap, they can write. We would do each of these on concert F, on Remington, on harmony chords, on Clark studies. We would take all of those exercises and do it on one of these rhythms. Have students compose their own variations. So if you notice, each of them are lettered. So you can say, you know, Jack, what should we do today? Let's do A, D, F, and G. Great, do it slowly. Everyone, ba, 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 ba. And you have them start to compose. That's another way. I think this, you know, when we talk about the national standards of composition and everything, I think we have this like grand idea they need to make a symphony. At least I thought that. But that's composing. That's putting these variations together and having them that creative ability to synthesize what they know and put it into a different context. That's composing. And it's a very basic level of composing, but it gets that spark initiated. And then the melodic priority. Maybe the upper voices play E, the lower voices play G, and the mid voices play C. So then you're layering things on top of each other, and as a director, you can start to balance things based on each individual piece. So hopefully, you know, there are many, you know, hundreds of creative ideas that you can do with the rhythm sheet, but maybe try and think more about how we can engage the students and using their own creative abilities. Okay, so here's what I want to do. I'm sorry it's going to be interactive. It's in the morning. I'm going to give some scores. Anyone have their own scores with them? Like they're performing? Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. You guys, you all can be a group doing the Bach. You guys all can be a group doing Shine. Let's see, we can do Fortress around here. And give Prelude, Siciliano, or Rondo. And let's see, we'll come over. You guys can, why don't you guys do Profanation? You guys can do the First Suite. Hooray, if you guys want to go over there. I know, I apologize, you got to move around, start talking. You guys can do Salvation is Created. All right, so here's what I want you to do. I I want you to try and apply these principles. I fully, sitting in that position, it's great, it's easy to do all of this, but we need the application of how this is going to work. So what I want you to do is kind of look through these scores, kind of create a list of the various principles. What do my students need to know to perform this piece? And then come up with 2 or 3 exercises, adaptations of fundamentals, and how we can, and then we'll just have a discussion to wrap things up. Okay, go ahead. And it'll work. You guys find a group. If you don't.
We're going to head over.
Okay.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you guys for coming. If I can help in any way, let me know.
Email to get your
Oh, yeah.
list of.
Let's see. Oh, you do? Okay, great. It's at the top of that. Okay, great. Yeah, I have them all.
You're in Michigan?
I am, yeah.
If you ever want to come to Iowa.
Absolutely. And yeah, I would love to.
Have my
Let me know.
contact info. And,
Okay, yeah, email me. Would love to. I have the whole winter semester. I'm basically done, so
okay.
would love to help out. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you guys. Take care.
Actually, what time is that shuttle leaving?
The what?
The shuttle.
Oh.
Stadium.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it is. So the rhythms I'll probably get over right here. So breaking it up. I mean, bringing that up if you want to have.
Sorry about that.
If you ever need help, I'm actually more afraid to call.
Right, no, yeah, push that
share, kind of go around the room to say the piece, some of the concepts, and then some of the adaptations.
Okay, we started going through a piece from the middle school reading band, American Legion March.
Yeah.
And it's, first of all, it's in cut time. So we would work on reading rhythms in cut time. And it has a lot of upbeat eighth note rhythms. So making a rhythm sheet with those different variations in there for everyone to play together. It has some interesting melodic lines, so writing them out for everybody. And then we also identified some places where we might add some people or take some people away in the scoring to help strengthen the part.
If you've ever had non-horn players try and play upbeats, it's hard. It is hard to teach. Like, no, it's hot. No. It is very hard to get them to do that, but it's a necessary skill. I get the tuba players to switch and do upbeats and the horns do downbeats. All right, cool. Where'd you guys?
We had Prelude, Siciliano, and Rondo, but the Prelude's missing, so.
It's only the two movements here.
And with the Siciliano, there's, at the beginning, there's the underlying D.
Wretched horn part.
And so we could have everybody do that, and the trumpet has the melody, which a lot of other people obviously have later. So giving that to everybody, just working on, how you want that to come across, and then layering and other things like that. So.
Awesome. That rondo is one of those that's easy to teach. If you write it out for everyone and work on it kind of in a warm-up and then apply it to the piece, it's just block scoring basically. It can come together really quickly if you set it up. Who else? Zach, Brendan, you guys?
We had Proclamation by Bernstein, and
I like
a lot of
these.
rhythmic changes in that song. And so we had one of the ideas you mentioned, like just let it sit on concert F.
Yeah.
So practice just getting the time changes when they all come in at measure 3 together.
Does everyone know the count, clap, tap system? So you're tapping with your foot, you're clapping the rhythm, and then you're also saying it. So and two, or you could be clapping the big beat, something. Getting the most amount of things moving at once.
Also playing drum set.
Basically, yeah.
Got it.
So if they're doing the big
Sure,
beats,
can't do.
and then they're doing 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and they're saying it, and you're getting 3 things going at once. And then you add the instrument, instead of clapping it, you can add the instrument and say and 1, and 2, and 1, and 2, and 1. Anything, any type of rhythm. You can making sure that you're trying to get as much engaged. Cool. Anything else?
That's basically, that's
Range of the wood.
That's
Go play high C sharp trumpets.
Yeah, the tricky
Again. Yeah.
Lots of time changes. That's really.
Right, that's the biggest concept of the biggest overarching umbrella in that piece. What, Fortress?
Yeah, we had Fortress. Right at the beginning, actually Frank DeKelly kind of takes the 2 motives that are throughout the whole piece and can write them out for the whole band and practice them that way. And the rest is a lot of articulation, counting, and weird harmonies.
So weird harmonies, that's the difference with that piece. And so how you can maybe adapt the harmony chords for that. So maybe you write it out. We did the harmony chords, and we did it in B flat, but then I would adapt it, and I would do it in C sharp, and I would do it, and I would add little 7s, and I would add little jazz chords. Okay, you guys play this chord. Okay, now horns, take this note, add it up. It's like a DCI thing. If you ever watched DCI, where they do the parts of the chord, and they go down, and they create these different colors. Kind of that same idea you can do to create chords like that. Oh, and now you have this really big cluster chord. No, that's not as balanced. Go back to the B flat chord. Good. Play the cluster chord again, and just tweak the levels until you get it. Good. That's in measure 35 with Fortress. Play measure 35 with Fortress, and so there's immediate application. Yeah. Who else? Where you got? You guys?
Shine by Markowski. It's very ethereal, working on A flat major key. Yeah, that's fun. Just do a rhythm sheet with the straight 8th notes and then adding in accents to get the lightness of it. There's a couple areas where there's upbeat entrances into the 8th notes, so make sure you understand getting into that and subdividing going into that. There's forte pianos in it, used extensively, so we want to do that with our F in the room.
Yep.
To make sure they know how to F it. And
Or not. Or not. F it up.
yeah. And then there's a 16th note woodwind run that's in the key of A flat, but starts on a D flat.
Yeah.
So work on your modes.
Yeah, again, that's one of the technique things. Look at the technique and then try to apply it. Starting on the 4th scale degree, starting on the 5th scale degree. Mess around with their brains a little bit. What else we got?
We've got Joyride by Rob Romaine. It's rated at 2.5, and we were looking at this from a middle school perspective. Lots of syncopated rhythms, ties over the bar line that we would isolate rhythmically first. And I said when I see things like that, I write out the rhythm without the ties in there.
Yes.
They learn
Forgot
that
to-
first,
yes.
and then I add it in there, and then their brains explode, and we
Yep.
relearn it all over again. And just a couple main melodies. There's a key change in there, so I said another thing that I would do is I would blow up that melody for the full band, and I'd have a version 1, version 2, the first one in E flat, the second one in F, just like it changes in the song.
Yeah.
And then they've learned that in both keys there, so that when we get to the key change, at least the melody's going to have the right fingerings in there, and we can work on the other stuff.
Cool.
We have Mount Everest by Rossano Galante. I don't know if y'all have ever heard it. I just heard of it. It came out in 2010. We played it with Cobb Winds. This is a really cool piece. It's a solid 4, bordering on 5 for some sections. The main thing we talked about was isolating all the triplets at the beginning, very much cutting it down into all the individual lines. A lot of marcatissimos, attacks that could be done. Entrances on the and of 1, which always blows the minds of any low brass or low wind person. Also entrances on the ands of 3 for the trumpets, which always messes them up because they want to slide it over an 8th note. And then a lot of articulation studies. So we would do it that way.
Cool. You guys right there.
We had Salvation is Created. Talked about obviously making phrases connect and taking long phrases. Talked about doing like the F around the room idea, but with the dynamic shaping and going from one group to the other, so they learn
Yeah.
how to connect the dynamics and match each other.
Singing it in Russian.
Yes, yes.
Or just create your own lyrics.
Yeah.
Have you ever done that? I did it. When we did the Maslenka short symphony, Maslenka made it in Herson. There's an opening clarinet solo. It's kind of a drone, and the clarinet has this recitative like thing on top of it. And so what I had the kids do was write a story and write lyrics. I gave them all the clarinet solo, like I printed it out or I put it online for them. This is before Google Forms, but I sent it to them, and then they had to print it out and write lyrics underneath, and then create a story of what is actually happening in the symphony. And that made the piece, like towards the last 3 weeks, when you want to pull your hair out because you're saying the same thing over and over, that is one thing that just sparked their imagination and took the entire piece to another level because they had a personal connection to it. So maybe you create lyrics to something, you create a story, their own personal one, and then have them share it. I think you'll be fascinated at what they come up with and how imaginative they can be about what the music sounds like to them. But they actually have to piece it together. It can't just be, this sounds pretty, this sounds like flowers, this sounds like whatever. But it's actually detailed, like the lyrics to every single note of the clarinet solo. So another way we can go beyond when we're against the wall and we're saying the same thing. What else do we have, Jeremy? You guys?
We had First Suite in E flat by Gustav Holst. Obviously, in this first movement, it uses a lot of this main melody in the low brass at the beginning. So obviously, you could write that out for everyone. At the beginning, it's also marked piano. So we mentioned that to work into playing in that dynamic range, you could play it at, say, a mezzo forte or forte, just to kind of establish good sound, good intonation, and then slowly go into that dynamic range. There's a lot of variation on that one theme, so you can definitely change the rhythm because it appears later on in the movement.
I mean, the one thing that I did that I thought was really fun is that's an opportunity to teach people about inversion and retrograde inversion. So I would write it out, and then it's really easy in finale. You can just kind of redo it. You can teach them, you can play it in inversion, you can play the two together. It's another way of getting it in their ear. And then what I had them do again, like in the last 3 weeks, when you need something creative, or when you have a test day and you have like 25 minutes of a class and it's not worth it, write out the variation for them, or write out the passacaglia, the chaconne for them, and then have them create their own variation of it. Like just kind of teach them very basics of it, but make it personal and then have them perform it the next day or next testing day of the 40 that you might have during the year. It's just an easy activity that you can do, but it's still engaging their imagination, and it's relatable to the piece. And then, okay, you created your own variation, now let's look at what Holst did in this fourth one when he turns it into minor, or he changes the orchestration of it. Just like, again, different ideas rather than beating our head against the wall. Yeah?
One of the biggest issues we always have is balance, is making sure, the most prominent lines coming out. And this isn't revolutionary, but if you guys ever done stop tonguing or bopping,
Yeah.
where you just play the beginning of each note, but you don't sustain a single thing, so that you can hear the entire, especially like measures where it's terraced entrances, and you just have them play the beginning of the note, and that's it. Just to isolate it and slow it down really far, then slowly speed it up. That's always been real beneficial for us.
Yeah. I always called it fronts of notes because what I learned is the sound of, if you say stop tongue, you're actually creating really bad habits for them, and bopping, you might be reinforcing bad habits. So I always said fronts of notes. And it got a little bit more of a sparkle of bop, instead of
that makes sense.
And making them create bad habits. So let's just do fronts of notes, ready, go. Again, just kind of one of those things that I recognized over time, and someone pointed it out to my ear once, of that's not really what you actually want.
Gotcha.
So entry, and try it. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Any others? I think the Bach. Love it.
Yes.
The Bach Fugalology.
Yeah. We, before you left, talked about rhythm exercises and articulation exercises and how to split up some of the parts that carry them back and forth. So you just do the same rhythm and then have half the band play one part and another part so they can learn how to do it together.
Yeah, the fugues are easy because you can, if you just write it out and then have it, kind of like what we did with the Hammersmith example, and then once you put it in the context of the piece, you've already actually rehearsed it in the order the fugue comes in, and the counter fugue and the balance of all of that. So that's great. Did I miss anyone? You guys? Awesome. I do need those scores back. I'm a very poor graduate student. So I can get those in the meantime. But just as an overview, somebody told this to me early in my career, it's your fault. It's Frank Troika said, anything that's going on in my classroom, I've somehow given permission for it. So if you pick the piece, that is your decision. So at the end of that performance, the last time they perform it, however it sounds, it's your fault, good or bad. And so I've always lived with that guilt. I've always lived with that mindset of I need to figure out the most efficient way to teach this teach this piece to my students. What is the most efficient way? And then always constantly reassessing my patterns, always reassessing at the end of rehearsal how it's going. How can I adapt my fundamentals for the specific piece? And really the factors for success are creativity. It's not going to work 100% of the time. I have failed more than I have succeeded at this. And sometimes you do an exercise and it just completely bombs. Like, all right, back to concert F. Here we go. That was not right. Yeah. But you just have to try it. You have to be willing to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And if this is uncomfortable for you, try it. Just write it out. And then get your mind to start, sparking of, oh, I can actually do this. Oh, I can, and then it becomes really fun. That's what I enjoy. I think of it as a puzzle of how I'm going to actually teach this piece and work this piece through. And then you pick a really challenging piece and you're like, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to do it. Personality, the more I watch teachers and the more that I'm teaching teachers, the more I'm convinced about their personality, is that if you think it's fun, you can get kids to do anything. The Hammersmith, kids still talk about that performance of Hammersmith and the recording, because when we finished the last note, it didn't matter that we were recording for Midwest or whatever. We finished the last note and you could just see the tears start in their eyes and they're like, because they knew what they did. They knew with the performance that they just had. And I will never forget that more so than anything else, is that feeling of the unity and the community of what we had just done together based on this whole process and the challenge. And then after that, they were like, okay, what's next, Mr. Meyer? Like, ah. So I taught music for Prague. We did music for Prague the next year. And I taught it the exact same way. The opening of the fourth movement, it's just concert F in 6/8. So you whittle it down to the least common denominator. And then the clarinets, you hike the clarinets up 3 octaves. Oh, God. All right, well, back to concert F. Here we go. Back up. So you work on isolating and really trying to minimize what actually is this music, and trying to debunk some of these myths about how hard it is for your students. I'm not saying, next year just all of a sudden go ahead and program the Intimate Symphony. There's a lot of other processes that need to happen that you're learning about this week and can talk about this week to get to that process, or wherever you are. Like I said, we did this with every band. We did this at the middle school level. We did this with beginning band on grade 1, grade half pieces, isolating the components, the larger picture of all of it. Planning your previous repertoire. We talked about planning backwards. Your preparation, your own preparation, thinking about, I don't listen to music in my car. I have never, unless I'm going on a long drive. But I use that opportunity as a time to plan. On the way home, thinking about the rehearsal, thinking about what went well, how am I going to plan next, and then on the way to school, thinking about that. Though that's kind of my preparation time and putting together these exercises. At first, it takes a long time, but then you kind of get quick at it of your go-tos, of what fundamentals am I going to do, how am I going to adapt them, and then what part of the piece am I going to work on, and I work backwards from there. Your pacing, like I said, rapid fire usually works, and that was my component. That's just part of my personality, and then sometimes I have to calm it down and get in my yoga voice, and this is how we, because the room can just go like this with you, and that gets kids really frantic and the sound changes. So understanding how the ebb and flow of all of that is really important when you're trying to do lots of fundamentals. The discipline and just having a vision for them and what you're going to do. So never limit the expectations, be creative, and if I can help in any way, like I said, if you want some of those exercises, I'm more than happy to send you. If you didn't get a handout, please let me know. I will email it to you, but my email's on the handout, and I'm around all week. So thank you all so much for coming. Have a wonderful week, and best of luck.